As day thinned into evening, the bridge became a calm line between two shores. Its shaped stone arches or wooden beams stood steadily over the slow water, outlined first in gold, then in the soft blue that follows sunset. The last carts of the day were already across, their wheels leaving faint marks on boards or flags. What remained was stillness, the quiet of stone cooling after sun, the river below turning from bright reflections to a smooth, dark sheen. Before we drift into tonight's story, make sure to subscribe so you'll never miss a gentle journey through history. Lantern hooks along the parapet waited for light. A keeper moved unhurriedly, touching flame to wick, one pool of glow at a time. Each lantern opened a small circle on the path, pale rings that overlapped like gentle ripples. Between them, the ridge held pockets of shadow, neither deep nor threatening, just enough dusk to remind travelers that night had begun. Underfoot, the texture spoke softly, the shallow grit of sand on stone, the faint hollow note of a plank near the crown, the whisper of a loose straw carried from a distant load. The handrail felt cool and slightly damp, its age worn smooth by years of palms. If a breeze came, it slipped over the span without hurry, carrying the clean scent of water and the earth of the banks. From below rose the river's low murmur. It pressed through the arches with a patient rhythm, gathering itself into the next. Reach as though the bridge were no more than a gentle obstacle. Here and there, an eddy caught the sky's last color and held it for a moment longer. A fish rose and fell. The sound was small, but on the evening bridge every small sound carried. Silhouettes moved with quiet purpose. A pair of neighbors paused. In the lantern glow, trading a few calm words before parting to opposite ends. A boy trotted after a slow cart, guiding it by habit more than need. A messenger on foot kept a steady pace, cloak folded close, boots striking a measured beat that faded as he passed. No one hurried. The bridge itself set the pace. Beyond the parapet, roofs and trees darkened into simple shapes. A watchman's figure appeared at intervals, not stiff or severe, just present checking latches, shielding a flame with his hand as he trimmed a wick. He moved like part of the structure, another element that belonged to the span: stone, water, light, and a quiet human step. As dusk deepened, the bridge seemed to lengthen. The near end and the far end felt more distant, though the distance had not changed. The lamps made islands of clarity, and between them the path felt like a soft corridor. Overhead the sky kept a last thread of color along the horizon, while the first faint stars took their places. Their reflections trembled in the water as the current shifted them gently out of line. If you paused midway and rested your hands on the warm, cool edge of stone, you could sense how the bridge held two kinds of time at once: the swift passing of footsteps and the slow endurance of the arch. A traveler's moment lasted only as long as it took to cross, yet the structure waited and waited, accepting each evening in turn, letting the river go on beneath it without complaint. By the time the final shade slipped from the sky, the lanterns had found their steady brightness. The bridge no longer needed detail to be itself. It kept its posture in the dark, confident, balanced, and quiet, ready for the soft traffic of the night. And anyone crossing then, whether with a bundle or with empty hands, felt the same gentle assurance: stone underfoot, light at intervals, water breathing below. In the 17th century, bridges took many forms: each shaped by the needs of its place and the skill of its builders. Some were broad and strong, their arches of stone rising over rivers with the calm permanence of walls. Others were lighter, drawn from timber, their beams creaking softly as carts and footsteps passed. By day they looked different, but by night each bridge found a new stillness. A stone bridge, seen in lantern light, seemed carved out of shadow itself. Its arches, massive in the day, turned into deep pockets of darkness beneath, while the surface glowed in places where the lamps touched its edges. Water slipped under those arches with a muted echo, the sound thickened by the hollow space. Moss along the stones held the day's dampness, releasing the faint scent of riverbanks and earth into the night air. Wooden bridges offered another kind of presence. Their beams and planks caught every sound, the faint knock of a boot heel, the soft thump of hooves, the whisper of a wheel as it rolled. The lanterns reflected off the polished surfaces worn by countless crossings, highlighting the grain of the wood in uneven streaks. Sometimes the boards shifted slightly beneath weight, not in danger, but in acknowledgement, as though each step were noted by the bridge itself. Both kinds of bridge shared a dignity in the evening hours. By day they were places of passage, part of the routine of merchants, farmers, and travelers. But at night they became landmarks of calm shapes suspended between two shores, their lines softened by darkness. From afar one might see only a darker band against the starlit sky, a line joining bank to bank. From near one could touch the cool surface, feel its solidity, and trust it as surely as the ground itself. Bridges were not only for travel, some were places to pause. A villager might lean on the parapet, resting after the day's work, letting the night air brush his face as the river moved beneath. A cart driver might halt midway to adjust a strap, the silence broken only by the quiet jingle of harness and the creak of leather. In those pauses, the bridge was not merely a structure but a resting place, a gentle stage on which the calm of the night unfolded. Seen from the river bank, the outlines were striking. A stone arch glowed faintly where lanterns hung, each light mirrored in trembling streaks below. A wooden bridge looked softer, its silhouette blending into the dark until only the lantern dots showed where the path lay. Both kinds of span had their own character, their own way of shaping the night. And yet, whether stone or timber, the bridge spoke the same message. It was a line of trust across water, a steady companion to footsteps, a presence that endured. While the night slowly passed, it stood not as a marvel to be admired, but as a quiet certainty, waiting for those who crossed. As night settled fully, bridges of the 17th century were never left in complete darkness. Light was needed to guide the traveler's step, to show the way across water, and to assure all who passed that the span was safe. Yet the light itself was never overwhelming. It came in small, steady pools, lanterns and torches set at intervals, glowing with quiet warmth against the cool air. Lanterns hung from iron hooks along the parapet, their panes of horn or glass softening the flame. The light within flickered gently, shifting with the night breeze, painting the stone or wood around it with moving gold. Where two lanterns overlapped, the path felt brighter. Between them lay stretches of calm shadow, where footsteps sounded louder and the river seemed closer. Torches, when used, burned with a steadier flame, their light broader, casting long shadows across the bridge. They carried a faint crackle, the slow sound of resin-fed fire, and their scent drifted into the night, wood smoke mingling with the damp smell of water. A torch might lean slightly in the wind, but the keeper who tended it adjusted its angle, making sure its flame burned straight. For travelers, these lights were reassurance. A cart driver, crossing at night, watched the glow ahead, each lantern marking progress. A lone rider saw the torchlight reflected on the wet stone, guiding his horse step by step. A villager carrying a basket found comfort in the warmth of flame, its glow standing firm against the vast darkness around. The bridge itself seemed to, too, change under such light. Its arches, hidden by the night, became outlined again where lanterns touched them. The parapets gleamed in strips, their edges sharp against the dark sky. Even the river below mirrored the points of flame, scattering them into trembling trails that drifted with the current. From the bank, the sight was calm and beautiful. The bridge floated in the night as though suspended by light alone, its length marked not by solid stone or timber, but by dots of fire strung across the water. It was a line of quiet glow, guiding travelers until dawn returned. So it was that lanterns and torches made bridges not only safe, but serene. Their light did not banish the night. It solved it. They showed enough for passage, left enough for wonder, and turned each crossing into a calm journey of shadow and glow. While lanterns and torches gave their steady glow, another kind of light touched bridges at night, the softer, older light of the moon. On clear evenings, when clouds drifted away, the moon's glow stretched across the river, silvering the arches and beams, and setting a calm sheen upon the water below. Stone bridges gleamed faintly beneath it, their surfaces pale, almost ghostly. The edges of each block stood out, while the arches beneath became deeper shadows. Wooden bridges caught the light differently, their planks shining in streaks where the moon struck directly, and vanishing into dark where beams blocked its reach. In both, the effect was gentle, a balance of glow and shadow, never harsh, always calm. On the water, the moon's reflection quivered with the current. It broke into long ribbons when the river flowed quickly, or into shimmering patches when the surface lay still. From the parapet, travelers often paused to watch it. A merchant with his cart, a rider leading a horse, or a villager with a bundle. All might linger for a moment, letting their eyes follow the silver trail across the dark. The bridge itself seemed a stage for this light. Lanterns gave warm gold, the moon gave cool silver, and together they painted the night. Where both met, the stones glowed softly, as though alive. Where neither reached, the shadow lay deep, filled with the quiet rush of water. In the stillness, every sound grew clearer. The steady ripple of the river, the faint creak of wood, the distant bark of a dog on the far shore, all seemed sharper under moonlight. Travelers felt the cool air more keenly, the dampness rising from the water brushing their faces, carrying with it the scent of reeds and moss. From the bank, the view was striking. The bridge became a pale arc, stretched across black water, its lanterns like points of gold set among strands of silver. Above, the stars kept their watch, faint compared to the moon, but steady, pinning the night into vast silence. To cross such a bridge was not merely to move from one bank to another. It was to step for a time into a place of calm beauty, where stone, water, flame, and moonlight joined. The path might have been practical, but at night it became something more, a quiet meeting of earth and sky, river and road, light and dark. When lanterns glowed and the moon set its silver path across the water, bridges of the 17th century came alive, not with noise, but with footsteps. Each crossing, though quiet, added its own rhythm to the night. The sound of saws against stone, or wood carried clearly in the stillness, each tap and shuffle weaving into the steady murmur of the river below. On a stone bridge the steps echoed faintly, striking the blocks with a hollow ring. Heavy boots of merchants gave a firm, measured beat, while lighter shoes of villagers whispered more gently across the surface. When the bridge arched high, footsteps sometimes slowed, each sound stretched as the traveler paused midway to look out across the water. Wooden bridges spoke in another tone. Boards creaked softly under weight, their grain answering each step with a subdued groan. Wheels added their own pattern, the steady rumble of a cart, the lighter rhythm of a barrow pushed by hand. Now and then a plank shifted with a faint thump, not in weakness but in recognition, as though noting the traveler who passed. In the calm of night, these sounds carried far. A man crossing at one end could be heard before he appeared in the glow of lanterns. Two sets of footsteps drawing together announced a meeting before words were exchanged. A horse's hooves struck in pairs, their rhythm steady, their echoes softening as they reached the far side. Travelers themselves felt the sound beneath them. Each step reminded them of the bridge's firmness, its certainty beneath the dark. The cool stone or the faint give of wood met their souls in turn, grounding them in a night that otherwise seemed wide and boundless. Sometimes footsteps stopped. A villager leaned on the parapet, resting before continuing home, his boots quiet. While he stood, a merchant paused to adjust a load, the scuff of leather breaking the silence for a moment before returning to stillness. These pauses gave the bridge its own breathing rhythm, sound, then quiet, then sound again. From the banks one could watch lanterns glow and hear the distant tread of unseen travelers. It was a reminder that the bridge was never empty for long. Even in the depth of night, footsteps would come and go, each one leaving behind only the faintest echo carried away by water and air. So when we picture bridges at night, we must not only see their light, but also hear their quiet music, the shuffle of feet, the creak of wood, the ring of stone, the soft passage of hooves and wheels. These sounds gave the night its life, steady, patient, and calm. If you're enjoying this quiet stroll through history, don't forget to subscribe for more peaceful stories like this. As night deepened on a 17th century bridge, the world became a study in outline. Where lanterns and torches gave their soft glow, shapes stood clear, but beyond those small pools of light, figures and structures melted into shadow. The bridge, the travelers, and even the river below took on new forms, seen not in detail, but in silhouette. Stone arches, solid in daylight, appeared as dark curves cut against the paler sky. Each span framed a patch of water, black but glimmering faintly, where the moon caught ripples. From a distance the bridge seemed to float above the river, its heavy blocks reduced to a simple band of darkness. Wooden beams offered a sharper look, long straight lines stretching across the water, their railings etched like strokes of charcoal against the stars. Travelers, too, became shadows, A cart piled with goods looked like a shifting block, moving slowly forward, its wheels creaking faintly in the quiet. A rider appeared as a tall shape crowned with a second outline, horse and human blended together in one silhouette. Even those on foot seemed different at night. Cloaks, baskets, or staffs lengthened their forms into figures that looked both familiar and mysterious. Lanterns played with these shapes, throwing shadows long and thin across the planks or stones. The shadows moved as their makers moved, sliding up the railings, stretching toward the arches, or rippling across the water below. A single flame could turn a small traveler into a tall presence, their outline towering on the parapet before shrinking again into darkness. Mist sometimes drifted across, softening every edge. In such moments the bridge seemed half real, half dream. Figures appeared and vanished as if woven from fog, footsteps marking their passage even as their shapes faded into the whiteness. The river, too, mirrored these changes, scattering silhouettes into rippling fragments, never still, always shifting. To stand at one end of the bridge and look across was to see a procession of moving outlines. A flicker of light revealed a traveler for a heartbeat. Then the figure slipped back into shadow. Shapes advanced and disappeared, their presence known as much by sound as by sight. There was nothing fearful in these silhouettes, only calm mystery. Night changed the bridge into a place of impressions, forms reduced to their essence, lines against the sky, shapes flowing across water. The bridge itself seemed to belong as much to the dark as to the day, carrying both light and shadow with equal grace. So when we imagine bridges at night, let us see not only the lanterns and the moon, but also the play of silhouettes, arches traced against the horizon, travelers drawn in outline, shadows sliding long across stone and wood. In these gentle shapes, the night gave the bridge a second life, one of quiet beauty and softened form. Beneath every bridge of the 17th century, the river carried on its endless journey. By day its surface sparkled with sunlight and reflected the bustle of travelers above. But at night, when footsteps slowed and voices soft, the river revealed another side, a low, steady murmur that filled the silence and gave the bridge its constant companion. Stone arches framed the sound, catching the water's movement and deepening it into echoes. Each arch hummed with its own tone, a sharper rush where the current pressed swiftly, a hollow resonance where the flow pooled in shadow. Standing midway, on such a bridge one might hear the river as a chorus of voices, never loud but always present, blending into a calm background that carried through the night. Wooden bridges let the sound rise more freely. Gaps between planks allowed the cool breath of the river to slip upward, carrying the moist scent of water and reeds. Below, the current tugged at supports, swirling around posts with soft eddies, creating a music of ripples and bubbles that change with every shift of flow. In the hush of night, the river's murmur became clearer than ever. A cart might pass, a rider might cross, but when the noise faded, the water returned steady, patient, unending. It was a sound both grounding and timeless, reminding all who listened that while men built bridges, the river remained, flowing beneath long before and long after each crossing. Travelers often paused to listen. A villager carrying a bundle might lean on the parapet, letting his thoughts settle to the rhythm of the water below. A merchant pausing to check his load might catch the steady hush, soothing after a long day's road. Even watchmen, pacing with lantern in hand, found calm in the river's voice, its sound guiding the quiet hours of their vigil. At times, the river's murmur was joined by small notes, the splash of a fish, the faint call of a water bird, the dip of an oar from a late boat slipping under the arches. These moments blended into the greater sound, adding variety to what was otherwise endless continuity. To stand on the bridge and lean into the night air was to feel the river's breath, cool and damp, and to hear its whisper weaving through every stone and beam. The bridge was firm, fixed, unmoving, but the river was alive, flowing, never the same from moment to moment. Together they formed a harmony, one still, one moving, one silent in strength, one speaking in constant murmur. So when we picture bridges at night, let us not forget what lay beneath them. More than lanterns, more than footsteps. It was the voice of the river that shaped the night. Calm, steady, and unbroken, it carried through every hour until dawn returned and the first light touched the span once more. As the night deepened, not all travelers had yet reached their inns or homes. Bridges in the 17th century often carried merchants who pressed on into the evening, their carts creaking under the weight of goods, their footsteps slower but steady, their eyes drawn toward the far side where rest awaited. A merchant's cart rolled heavily across stone, the iron rims of its wheels ringing against the blocks with a hollow rhythm. Lanterns fixed at intervals threw their glow onto the passing load, sacks of grain, bundles of cloth, baskets covered with cloth to keep them safe. Shadows lengthened and shifted as the cart moved from one pool of light to another, the goods briefly shining, then fading into darkness again. On wooden bridges, the sound was different. The planks responded to the weight, groaning faintly beneath each wheel. Hooves struck in pairs, their rhythm echoed by the slow creak of leather harness and the faint jingle of iron buckles. The air carried the mingled scents of goods, dried herbs, fresh wood, wool packed tightly in bales. It was not strong, not overwhelming, just faint traces left in the cool night air as the cart moved along. Some merchants walked beside their carts, hands on the harness, guiding their animals with quiet words. Others rode on the plank seat, shoulders hunched beneath cloaks, their heads turning now and then toward the glow of lanterns or the silver of the moon on the water. Few spoke much, for the night called for silence. Their passage was steady, practical, without flourish, yet marked by a certain dignity. The calm patience of work carried past daylight. From the river bank, such crossings looked like processions of shadow and glow. A cart entered the bridge from one end, its outline sharp against the lantern behind it. Step by step it advanced, the goods shifting slightly with the movement, the merchant's form bending forward as he guided the way. By the time it reached the far shore, it had passed through light and shadow many times, leaving only the faint echo of wheels and hooves behind. Even when the bridge was nearly empty, the late merchants gave it life. Their crossings reminded all that bridges were not ornaments but working paths, built to carry the labor of many from one side to the other. By day they bustled with crowds. By night they still bore their share of weight, patient and steady beneath every step and wheel. And when at last the cart rolled down the slope and onto the road beyond, the bridge settled back into silence, the lanterns swaying gently, the water murmuring below, waiting for the next traveler who would come upon its span. Not every bridge was left unattended through the night. In towns and cities and on the more important crossings, watchmen were stationed to guard the span. Their presence was not dramatic nor loud, but quiet and steady, part of the calm rhythm of the night. A watchman carried a lantern, its glow shielded from the wind, and walked the length of the bridge at intervals. His boots struck stone or wood in measured steps, the sound steady but unhurried. From time to time he paused to check the hooks that held the lamps, trimming a wick or nudging a flame back to life. The faint scent of smoke clung to his cloak, mixed with the dampness of the river air. At the parapet, he leaned and looked down at the water. The river's current reflected the points of light from above, twisting them into wavering streaks. Now and then a boat slipped quietly under an arch, its oars dipping in silence, acknowledged only by the watchman's brief glance before he resumed his walk. His duty was simple: to keep the bridge safe. That meant watching for travelers who needed help, for carts that faltered, or for the occasional dispute between late crossers. Most nights passed without incident. The watchman's main task was simply to be there, a steady figure whose lantern assured all who approached that the bridge was tended, not abandoned. In small villages, a single watchman sufficed. In towns, two or more might share the hours, meeting in the middle to exchange a word before continuing their rounds. Their conversations were quiet, carried away by the river, nothing more than murmurs that blended with the sound of flowing water. From a distance, the watchman was little more than a moving shadow. His lantern glowed, then disappeared, then glowed again as he passed through arches of light and dark. His shape became part of the bridge's life, like the swaying of a torch or the shifting of a shadow. Travelers took comfort in his presence. A villager carrying a bundle home, a merchant with a late cart, or a rider guiding his horse, all knew that someone was near, watching, ready if needed. The watchman rarely spoke, but his lantern said enough. The bridge was safe, the night was. Steady, and order was kept. So when we picture bridges at night, we must see not only stone and water, lanterns and moonlight, but also these quiet figures pacing their rounds. The watchman gave the bridge a human heartbeat, a rhythm of footsteps, and light that carried through the hours until dawn. Night on a 17th century bridge was not only seen and heard, it was also felt and breathed. The air carried its own calm presence, a mixture of scents that spoke of stone, water, wood, and earth. To cross a bridge at night was to walk through an invisible atmosphere shaped by the river below and the world around. The river gave the strongest note. Its breath rose cool and damp, carrying the faint mineral scent of flowing water. In summer, reeds and grasses along the banks added their freshness, a green, earthy smell that softened the sharpness of stone. In winter, the air turned cleaner, crisper, almost metallic in its coldness. The river's surface sometimes edged with ice that chilled the breath. Stone bridges carried the smell of the day within their blocks. As the evening cooled, they released the warmth stored by sunlight, mingled with the scent of moss tucked into cracks along the parapets. Wooden bridges gave off their own quieter fragrance, the resin of old beams, the worn sweetness of planks rubbed smooth by years of passage. When damp, the boards deepened their aroma, the smell of timber returning each time night air touched them. Lanterns added their contribution. A torch gave a faint smoke that drifted with the breeze, resin and wood mingling with river air. A small oil lamp carried a gentler trace, the smell of warmed oil barely noticeable, except when one passed directly beneath. These scents were never heavy, only soft undertones in the larger chorus of the night. Merchants brought with them hints of their goods. A cart of wool carried the faint musk of fleece. A sack of grain released a dry, nutty aroma. Herbs wrapped in cloth gave away small whiffs of rosemary or thyme as the wheels creaked past. Even when such traces faded quickly, they left a memory that blended into the bridge's night air. For travelers, these scents shaped the experience of crossing. A villager might pause halfway, take a breath, and recognize the cool freshness of water rising around the stone arches. A rider guiding his horse felt the air thicken slightly near the middle, damp from the river's wide channel. A watchman, pacing his rounds, grew accustomed to each note, until the smell of the night became as familiar as the sight of lantern glow or the sound of footsteps. So when we imagine bridges at night, let us not think only of what was seen or heard, but also of what was breathed. The smell of stone warmed and cooled, the freshness of river air, the timber softened by damp, the quiet traces of goods passing across, all blended into the night. To walk across was not only to move from one bank to another, but to pass through an atmosphere that was as calm and memorable as the bridge itself. Though bridges were built for passage, they were also places where people lingered. In the 17th century, night crossings often brought quiet encounters. A bridge, with its gentle light and the hush of the river below, became a natural meeting place. Travelers paused not only to rest, but also to speak, words exchanged softly under lantern glow. Neighbors sometimes stopped midway to share a few sentences after a long day. Their voices carried in low tones, calm and measured, blending with the murmur of water beneath. They might discuss the day's work, news from the market, or the weather of the coming morning. The meeting was brief, the words practical, yet the setting gave them weight, as though the night itself listened. Merchants, too, exchanged greetings as their carts passed one another. One paused his horse to let another roll by, and in that pause came a word of respect, a comment on the load, or a short remark about the road ahead. The lanterns flickered across their faces, their shadows stretching along the planks, while the river accepted each syllable and carried it away. Sometimes families walked together, their children whispering and laughing as they crossed. Parents hushed them gently, their voices soft but kind. The sound of home carried across the night span. The bridge seemed to amplify the smallest sounds, yet without harshness, each voice clearer, each pause more noticeable, as though the space itself gave dignity to simple speech. Watchmen often overheard these exchanges, though they rarely intruded. Their task was not to stop talk, but to ensure safety. From a distance they saw heads bend close, hands gesture faintly in the glow, and they recognized the bridge's other role, not only a road across water, but a place where lives briefly touched before parting again. The air of these meetings was calm. No one lingered long. The night encouraged brevity. Yet for a moment, two travelers stood together, their words joining with the soft hiss of river and the dim flare of lantern light. When they parted, their footsteps faded in opposite directions, leaving the bridge once again to its stillness. So when we picture bridges at night, let us remember that they were not only crossings, but quiet stages. They held not only the weight of stone and carts, but also the lighter burden of whispered conversation, neighbors greeting, merchants exchanging courtesies, families guiding children. In those soft encounters, the bridge belonged as much to human connection as to travel itself. By day, bridges carried constant movement, but at night their sounds were fewer, slower, and more distinct. Among the most familiar of these were the measured beats of hooves and the rolling hum of wheels, a quiet music that filled the span with rhythm. Horses crossing in the dark struck the surface with steady certainty. On stone bridges, each hoof rang lightly, a hollow tap echoing beneath the arches. The rhythm came in pairs, left and right, steady as a heartbeat, carrying across the water in calm repetition. On wooden bridges the sound was different, softer, muffled by planks, but joined by the faint creak of beams responding under weight. Wheels added their own voice. A cart's iron rims grumbled over stone, creating a low hum that blended with the river's murmur. When the wheels rolled across timber, the tone grew deeper, the boards answering with a gentle groan, almost like a sigh beneath the load. Together, hooves and wheels created a slow duet, one sharp and measured, the other low and continuous. The sounds varied with the traveler. A lone rider passed quickly, the hoofbeats rising in crisp, short bursts that faded into the distance. A heavy cart moved slower, its wheels dragging a longer note across the span. When both appeared together, a rider passing a cart, the bridge filled with layers of rhythm, brief moments of fullness before settling again into quiet. For those who stood nearby, perhaps a watchman or a villager pausing to rest, the sound was reassuring. It meant the bridge was alive, still serving its purpose even at night. The measured beat and rumble marked the passage of commerce and travel, proof that the world continued even when much of the town slept. From the banks, the noise carried across the water, softened by mist. A listener could tell by sound alone whether the bridge bore a light step or a heavy load. The river echoed it faintly, sending the rhythm downstream until it dissolved into silence. And then, when hooves and wheels reached the far end, the bridge grew still again. The last echoes faded into the night, leaving only the quiet hiss of water and the steady glow of lanterns. The span, for a time, belonged once more to shadows and silence, until the next traveler brought back the music of motion. So when we think of bridges at night, we must not forget this sound. The patient beat of hooves, the low roll of wheels, the gentle creak of beams. Together, they formed a soft music that gave the night its rhythm, a reminder that every crossing left its own note behind. Let's pause for just a moment, and if you haven't already, subscribe to join us for more calm stories. Every bridge was more than a structure of stone or timber. It was a link. At night in the 17th century, the span joined not only two banks of a river, but two lives of settlement, the quiet villages and towns that lay beyond each end. To cross a bridge in darkness was to pass from one world into another, guided by light and steady footing. On one side of a bridge might rest a village, its cottages gathered close, their windows dimly glowing from small fires within. The air carried the faint smoke of hearths, drifting over the river and mingling with the damp night air. Dogs barked softly now and then, but most of the place slept. Only the distant outline of roofs, chimneys, and trees hinted at life resting in stillness. On the opposite side, perhaps a larger town waited. Its streets were narrow, its houses pressed tight, lanterns swinging faintly at corners where guards kept their rounds. From the bridge, one could see faint rows of light marking the town's heart, each one guiding the way to an inn, a market square, or a guild hall. Though the bustle of the day was gone, the town still gave off a low hum. Life, voices carrying from late drinkers or the echo of boots on a watchman's patrol. For travelers, the bridge was the threshold between these two worlds. A farmer might leave the quiet of his village to carry goods into town, crossing in the night so he would arrive with the morning market. A merchant, returning from business, felt relief at the sight of his homeside's lanterns glimmering faintly in the dark. Each end of the bridge promised something different. One side rest, the other opportunity. Seen from the riverbanks, the contrast was striking. At one end, only a handful of lanterns marked the houses, their reflections small and scattered. At the other, more lights gathered, glowing as though the town itself breathed in steady rhythm. The bridge lay between, a line of calm over water, linking the stillness of one shore with the subdued activity of the other. The river, uncaring, flowed beneath, its murmur constant. But for those above, the crossing meant more than water passed. It meant connection. From quiet fields to busy streets, from narrow lanes to open roads. At night, the bridge carried these. Crossings in calm dignity, never rushing, always steady, a reminder that both village and town relied on it in equal measure. So when we picture bridges at night, let us also picture the lives on either side, cottages dim and still, towns faintly glowing in the distance. A bridge was their thread, drawn across the dark, binding them together under moonlight and lantern glow. Some nights the bridge stood sharp and clear under lanterns and moonlight. Other nights the river breathed upward and sent mist across its arches, wrapping stone and timber in drifting veils. In the 17th century, this was a familiar sight. Fog rising from cool water, softening the outlines of bridges until they seemed half real, half dream. The mist crept along the river first, a pale blanket spreading over the surface. From below, it climbed the arches, spilling onto the deck, where footsteps moved. Lanterns glowed faintly within it, their circles of light blurred, their edges gone. The flame itself flickered with halos, as though shining through glass. To approach a bridge in such weather was to see only dots of glow suspended in whiteness, with little sense of the path until one was already upon it. Travelers entered this fog quietly. Their steps, muffled by damp air, seemed closer than they were. A rider guiding his horse felt the animal hesitate, its hoof cautious on the hidden path. A cart driver leaned forward, watching the blurred lanterns ahead, the sound of wheels and hooves carrying further than their shapes. Even a villager on foot moved more slowly, stretching out a hand to feel the cool stone of the parapet as a guide. The bridge itself changed character in mist. Its solid lines disappeared, replaced by softened shapes. Arches faded into shadow. Parapets melted into the air, and the structure seemed less a span of stone or wood than a passageway suspended between banks of whiteness. Some said such nights made the bridge feel endless, as though the far side had retreated into silence, waiting to appear only at the last step. The river's voice grew stronger in these moments. With sight dulled, sound took its place. The steady rush of water, the drip from beams, the splash of fish rising unseen, all filled the night more fully. Each noise seemed louder, yet also calmer, amplified by the mist that wrapped the ears as much as the eyes. For watchmen, the task became slower. Their lanterns cut only short tunnels of light, leaving the rest of the bridge hidden. Yet they paced steadily, their figures appearing and vanishing, sometimes no more than a shadow against thicker shadow. To travelers, the sight of a lantern moving within fog was a reassurance, proof that the path, though blurred, remained safe. From the banks, a mist-covered bridge seemed otherworldly. Only the faintest outline showed, the glow of lanterns scattered into small clouds. The water reflected nothing clearly, only tremors of light moving through haze. And yet the bridge remained firm beneath the blur, carrying each step as faithfully as on the clearest night. So when we imagine bridges at night, we must also picture them in mist, their edges softened, their lights blurred, their presence turned dreamlike. In such moments they seemed less like works of builders and more like shapes belonging to the night itself, woven from stone, air, and water's breath. On clear nights when mist did not rise and clouds drifted away, bridges lay beneath a vast roof of stars. In the 17th century, the night sky was untouched by city glare. Its constellations stretched in unbroken clarity, their patterns as familiar to travelers as the stones beneath their feet. To cross a bridge under such a sky was to move not only across water, but beneath a canopy of calm light. Lanterns glowed along the span, but their reach was small. Beyond their circles of gold, the heavens opened wide. Stars trembled faintly in the current below, their reflections scattered across the water's surface. Each ripple reshaped them, breaking their points into flowing streaks, so that the river seemed to carry the sky itself downstream. Stone bridges looked firm and grounded under this expanse, their arches black against the glittering field. Wooden bridges appeared lighter, their lines etched sharply against the glow above. Either way, the structure became a frame, a path that drew eyes upward as much as forward. Travelers often paused midway to look up. A farmer guiding his cart might stop a moment to rest the horse, his gaze wandering from the lantern glow too. The Milky Way stretched across the sky. A rider alone might lift his head, finding direction not only from the path beneath him, but from the stars that marked his course. Even villagers on foot, carrying small bundles, found a kind of company. In the constellations that looked down without change, night after night, the sounds of the bridge fell away during such pauses. The river murmured, wheels creaked, but the stillness of the sky made every sound feel smaller, quieter, held within the vast silence above. For some, the stars brought reassurance, a sense that the world, wide and dark, had its own steady order. For others, they were simply beauty, points of light scattered like dust, turning the bridge into a stage beneath their glow. From the banks, the sight was striking. The bridge, faintly lit by its lanterns, stretched like a dark ribbon beneath a river of stars. The water below carried both reflections, the dots of flame from above the span, and the scattered sparks of the sky beyond it. It was a picture of calm harmony, stone, water, and night bound together. So when we imagine bridges at night, let us remember the stars above them. They framed the crossings, gave direction to travelers, and mirrored themselves in the river's shifting surface. In their patterns lay the quiet assurance that while footsteps passed and carts rolled, the sky remained steady, timeless, and serene. Though bridges were built for passage, they sometimes became places of rest. In the 17th century, a long journey often carried travelers into the night, and when inns were distant or roads uncertain, the bridge itself offered shelter. Its arches, parapets, and beams gave quiet refuge against wind, rain, or fatigue. Beneath a stone arch, the air felt cool and damp, but it was dry compared to the riverbank. Travelers sometimes slipped down the embankment to sit on the ledge where the stone met water, listening to the steady flow as they rested their backs against the wall. The murmur of the river became a lullaby, broken only by the occasional drip of water seeping from cracks in the masonry. Wooden bridges offered different corners of refuge. A cart driver might pull to the side and let his horse breathe, standing beneath a lantern's glow while adjusting straps or covering goods. A lone rider might pause halfway, lowering himself from the saddle to walk in circles, stretching stiff legs before mounting again. Even a villager on foot, weary from distance, could lean on the parapet, laying his bundle at his feet and gazing at the dark surface of the river until strength returned. In heavier rain, travelers sometimes gathered together under the broad stone arches, waiting for the storm to pass. There they spoke quietly, their voices mingling with the drum of rain on water. A lantern held high turned the arch into a small chamber of light, the world outside blurred by sheets of falling water. For that brief time, the bridge was not only a path, but a roof. Watchmen, too, knew the bridge as shelter. On stormy nights, they stepped beneath arches, shielding their lanterns until the worst had passed. Their presence gave reassurance to any traveler who approached, for even in harsh weather, the bridge remained tended. To rest on a bridge was not to claim it, only to borrow its strength for a moment. The stone or timber stood unmoving, calm, and enduring, while the traveler found brief comfort in its shelter. Soon the journey resumed. The cart rolled on, the rider mounted again, the villager lifted his bundle. The bridge returned to stillness, holding no sign of the pause except in memory. So when we imagine bridges at night, let us picture not only the constant movement across them, but also the moments of stillness upon them, a merchant pausing beneath an arch, a villager leaning against the parapet, a rider resting in the lantern glow. For in those pauses the bridge revealed another of its roles, not only a path across water, but a quiet shelter against the long night. Even in the quiet hours, bridges carried work forward. In the 17th century, towns and villages depended on markets, and those markets depended on goods arriving in time for the first light of morning. Bridges steady in the night became part of this rhythm. Long before the square filled with voices and coins, the crossing of carts and baskets prepared the day to come. Merchants guided their loads across under lantern glow. The carts moved slowly, wheels groaning as they bore sacks of grain, barrels of flour, bales of cloth, or bundles of herbs. Horses leaned into their harnesses with calm patience, their hooves striking a measured beat that echoed across the water. From time to time a driver whispered encouragement, his breath visible in the cool air, rising briefly before fading into the dark. Smaller traders passed on foot, carrying baskets on shoulders, or leading donkeys laden with panniers. Their steps were light but steady, the sound of goods shifting with each movement. Covered baskets gave off faint scents, dry wheat, earthy roots, or the sharper note of onions, small hints of the meals that would later fill the market square. The bridge itself gave passage without judgment. Its stones or planks bore the weight of each cart, the tread of each foot, the shifting loads that pressed across. Lanterns cast their light onto barrels and baskets, making shadows swell and shrink as the travelers advanced. In the silence of night, the bridge became not a grand structure, but a simple road of service, carrying the work of many into the promise of dawn. From the riverbank, the scene was calm but purposeful. One could see the glow of lanterns moving across the span, dots of light advancing slowly, each one tied to the rhythm of commerce. The sound of wheels, muffled by distance, blended with the river's murmur, while the bridge stood firm, patient, and unchanging. By the time first light touched the horizon, much of the market's supply had already crossed. Piles of wood for cooking, sacks of flour for baking, herbs for healing, and cloth for tailoring were already waiting in town. The bridge had played its part in silence, its nightly crossings unseen by most, yet vital to the day's life ahead. So when we picture bridges at night, let us imagine not only the solitude of moon and mist, but also the quiet passage of goods. The bridge was more than a path of stone or wood. It was a thread of trade, binding the stillness of night to the bustle of morning. Night gave bridges a different kind of life, when the air was still and the river flowed steadily beneath. Every sound that touched the span seemed to linger, stretching further than in daylight. A single step or word could travel the length of the bridge, carried by stone, timber, and water until it dissolved into silence. Footsteps were the clearest. On stone bridges, each boot rang with a light hollow note, repeated and repeated, echoing between the arches. On wooden bridges, the creak of planks joined the rhythm, answering every step with a soft reply. Travelers often heard their own movements return to them, as if another walker followed close behind. Voices carried two merchants speaking in low tones as their carts passed, could be heard halfway across the span. The calm air gave their words more reach, though the meaning often faded into murmurs. A watchman calling to another at the far end found his voice reflected back, softened, but recognizable, the bridge itself seeming to answer. Even small sounds grew larger in the night. The jingle of a harness bell, the clink of a buckle, the scuff of a shoe against stone, all gained clarity, lifted by the stillness and set afloat upon the water. Dogs barking on the banks or roosters crowing from distant farms could be heard. Faintly from the middle of the bridge, their echoes mixing with the murmur of the river. For travelers, these echoes brought a sense of company. A man walking alone felt less solitary when his steps returned behind him. A cart driver heard his. Wheels roll not only beneath but also around him, as though the bridge itself shared the sound. Even in quietness, the span seemed alive, speaking back to every passerby with gentle repetition. Mist and fog deepened this effect. Sounds softened and stretched, footsteps echoing longer, voices muffled into whispers that still carried. In such moments, the bridge felt both near and far at once, each sound close, yet also fading into a distance that could not be measured. From the banks, one could often hear echoes, long before seeing the traveler who made them. A cart approached unseen, its wheels thumping in hollow rhythm, until lantern light finally revealed its form. A rider's hooves tapped the planks, their sound arriving first, the figure following only after. So when we think of bridges at night, let us not imagine only the silence, but also the echoes that lived within it. Each step and voice lingered a little longer, a quiet reply from stone and water. In these echoes the bridge spoke back, not in words, but in calm resonance, reminding all who crossed that they were never entirely alone. Every journey across a bridge, no matter how long or short, carried with it the gentle anticipation of reaching the far shore. In the stillness of night, this moment felt even more pronounced. The crossing, filled with echoes, lantern glow, and the murmur of water, always ended in the quiet certainty of solid ground beyond. For a merchant with a cart, the slope down from the bridge signaled relief. Wheels struck earth again, their sound changing from hollow echoes on stone to the softer thud of packed dirt or the crunch of gravel. The horse, sensing the change, often shook its head, the faint jingle of harness rising into the cool night. Behind, the bridge remained in darkness, its lanterns glowing like a suspended line across the water. A villager on foot felt the same shift. The bridge, steady beneath each step, gave way to the firmness of the bank. Grass brushed at boots, paths wound toward cottages or fields, and the scent of earth replaced the damp breath of the river. Lanterns at the far end marked the boundary, a final circle of glow, after which fields or streets stretched ahead. Riders experienced the transition most clearly. Hooves rang on stone or groaned across timber, then soft once more on soil. The rhythm of the animal's gait seemed to relax, no longer bound to the hollow echoes of the bridge, but freed again upon the open road. For some travelers, the end of the crossing brought comfort, a sign that the night's journey was nearer to its rest. For others, it marked only the next stage of the road, with many miles still to travel before dawn. Yet all felt the quiet satisfaction of leaving behind the span that had carried them safely over water. The bridge itself receded behind them, its shape blending once more into the dark. From a distance, only the faint dots of lanterns revealed its presence, strung like stars across the river's width. The sound of footsteps, hoof, or wheels faded, and the span returned to stillness, waiting patiently for the next traveler. So when we imagine bridges at night, we must remember not only the crossing itself, but also its ending, the quiet step onto the far shore, the change of sound beneath, the feeling of ground welcoming the traveler onward. The bridge gave safe passage, but it was the shore that gave closure, the place where night travel continued, leaving the span in silence until another set of footsteps began. When the last traveler had crossed, when carts rolled away into villages and footsteps faded into the distance, the bridge remained alone in the night. Its lanterns swayed gently in the breeze, their flames steady but quiet, casting circles of light onto empty stone and wood. Beneath, the river carried on without pause, its murmur constant, its surface dark and silvered by the sky. The bridge seemed to breathe in stillness. Without the rhythm of hooves or the echo of voices, its presence became calm and unbroken. The arches stood firm, holding back the weight of centuries, while above the path stretched empty, marked only by light and shadow. The world beyond slept, cottages silent, towns dim, fields hidden in darkness. Yet the bridge kept its place, a silent link across the water. Occasionally a watchman's lantern moved, a small glow pacing the span. His steps echoed faintly, then disappeared again into silence. A late bird stirred among the reeds, or a fish splashed briefly below, but soon the river reclaimed its steady rhythm, and the night folded itself back into quiet. Above, the stars kept their slow watch. Constellations drifted across the sky, mirrored in trembling streaks upon the current. The moon, if full, cast long silver lines along the parapet. If gone, darkness deepened, leaving lanterns as the only marks of light. In either case, the bridge endured, neither seeking attention nor needing it. Toward dawn, the air grew colder, carrying a faint freshness that hinted at morning. Mist sometimes rose again, softening the span until it looked like a shadow upon water half seen and half imagined. The first birds stirred on the banks, their calls thin and hesitant, as if uncertain of breaking the stillness. And then, at last, a pale line of light touched the horizon. The lantern flames, once bright, grew faint against the widening glow. Stone arches and wooden beams regained their shapes, the outlines of the span sharpening against the sky. The bridge, which had held its calm vigil all night, now welcomed the return of day. So ended the long hours of quiet. The bridge had rested, not in sleep, but in patience, carrying the night with dignity until dawn returned. It was ready once more for carts and footsteps, for merchants and villagers, for the endless rhythm of travel. But in the silence of those dark hours, it had shown another side. The bridge at rest, a calm figure stretched across water, keeping its place between two shores until the morning came.